Rockabye Jesus. Hey, we should probably stop with the last one.
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. That's not nails you hear. Kumbaya.
Hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys.
Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 234. And we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul, my friend, how are you doing?
You may now call me Nostradamus. After the weekend, I have terrified people with my predictions.
Of course, you correctly guessed the winners of the Super Bowl. There's you and there's that psychic dog.
But the psychic dog didn't say exactly how many points they'd win by. I did.
Okay. For a second there, I thought we might have a whole Mozart and Salieri battle of the psychics, but apparently not.
Nope. 15:42 on Sunday afternoon. I said, happy Super Bowl day. Seahawks to win by 16. And the final score was Seahawks 29, Patriots 13.
So that dog could go fuck himself.
Absolutely. Chew on a bone.
Man, I should have talked to you and then put some money down. I was going to bet, and I thought, no, I shouldn't. I don't really have enough money to be betting, but you can't lose with Paul Bestall.
See, God knows what you'd have got if you'd have got that right. I don't know why. I just had that fit. I've decided this year I'm going to go with my gut and not try and suppress it as much. And that's one of the first things. I just went, yeah, I think they'll win this by 16 points.
So if you sign up to patreon.com/Ghost guys, get access to the the Discord, you too can pester Paul for sports predictions.
Yeah. Put it all on Commanders to win it next year, everyone. All the Cowboys not to.
There you go.
Either way is a sure thing.
Well, I did not watch the Super Bowl. It has been a week since we last spoke. I won't get into it, but it has been it's been a week. And I woke up last night. I had terrible dreams, and I know this because I remember bits of them, and I remember enough of them that I woke up and wrote them down to tell you about them. But I was not awake long enough to include any context. So what I have for you is Ford Fairlane sandwich, ham, egg, pastry, maybe honey and cinnamon, Deadpool. That's what I wrote down when I woke up last night because I thought, Paul, I need to tell Paul about this. And I think I assume because of Ford Fairlane is why I need to tell you. But also maybe you were looking for a great taste sensation as far as sandwiches go.
I can't remember. Does he have a sandwich in the film? He has a specific drink, which is his Sambuca milkshake.
Sure. No, I cannot imagine. Even if he did, I cannot imagine they would slow the proceedings down long enough to laboriously tell us every step in the sandwich creation process. I don't know what the fuck my brain was doing last night.
I reckon it's definitely got some pastrami and mustard on rye in it, personally. Ford looks like that kind of guy. He looks like me. I like pastrami.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a feel of pastry kind of guy. But
nah, not a croissant for him. Probably shoot it.
But I do remember the Deadpool. Well, or that. Yeah, that's not impossible. See, this is why the movie's never been properly ported to Blu-ray. All right. Well, you did not come here to psychoanalyze us on the basis of our dreams. That's probably a good thing. Yeah. But you did come for some ghost stories, and you are in luck because we have a very special episode. We actually have two special episodes coming up. On this episode, we are going to be sharing stories from a legendary ghost author whose work was specifically on the state of New Mexico. His name is Antonio Garcez, and we have received permission from his estate, from his husband, Hank Estrada, to tell some of Antonio's stories on the show, specifically from his 1998 book, Adobe Angels, The Ghost Stories of O'Keefe Country. And O'Keefe Country, of course, is a region of northern New Mexico, which was frequently painted by painter Georgia O'Keefe. It encompasses Santa Fe up to Abiqui, through Ghost Ranch, and up to Taos. There are some folks who don't enjoy that name, but of course, This book was published back in 1998, so we're going to go with it because that's the name Antonio chose. But yeah, I'm very excited to do this. I found Antonio's stuff going through the Internet Archive. He himself passed away in 2023 due to complications from Parkinson's, but he has left an incredible body of work, up to I want to say 24 books, in which he collected, just like I did for Strange, speaking to people firsthand. He collected the stories of New Mexico. It is an incredible treasure trove of material. And again, his husband Hank has carried his legacy forward via Red Rabbit Press, which is the press that they started together in the late 1980s, and continues as ghostbooks.biz. So this episode, we're going to be just telling stories out of Adobe Angels. And then on the next Talk Spooky, we're going to have Hank on. He's going to tell us a little bit about Antonio's work, some of his favorite stories, and just a little more about the life of this amazing guy. Again, Antonio R. Garcez, who was one hell of a researcher and a pretty great writer too. But before we do that, we have to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you. For real, guys, every single person who supports the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But folks who can support us financially, you are the ones who make the wheels on the bus go round and round, and we are deeply grateful to every single one of you. And while we'd like to thank every single one of you, right now we're going to thank our latest subscribers. They are
Big Paul,
Nate,
Maria Sandoval,
Martin V. Azevedo,
Gorimos,
Lauren Barnes,
Maraid,
and Seth O'Shields. Again, thank you. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. And if you want to get access to early ad-free release, bonus conversations between myself and Paul, episodes of shows like Host Adventures, Sunken Library, our monthly live streams, our Ghost Force shoutouts, and so much more, click the link in the show notes, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or become a Capitalista on Apple Podcasts. That's $5 a month to get you access to all the bonus episodes, the early release. The only thing you don't get is a monthly live stream, and that's just because of the way Apple is set up. But if you do sign up to become a Cabanista on Apple Podcasts, forward your receipt to me at ghoststoryguys@gmail.com, and we will make sure to shout you out the next time we do a patron call out, because we really appreciate you guys too, and we want to make sure that you are properly acknowledged. We're not actually given a list, so I can't do it unless you forward it to me, but if you would like that, we'd very much like to thank you ourselves. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Adobe Angels, the Ghosts of O'Keefe Country. We're going to start with the introduction to the book Adobe Angels. And I should say we chose this one because it is no longer in print. So these are stories that you can read for yourself for free on the Internet Archive if you want. Again, we're only going to be reading a very small portion of the book. But if you do want more ghost stories, and you'll hear us say this throughout the show, you can go to ghostbooks.biz and you can find all of Antonio Garcez's work, or much of it at least, that's still in print. And again, there's some fantastic stuff there. If you like what Ruth Roper Wilde has done with These Haunted Times for the UK, Antonio has done that for New Mexico. So again, we're going to read the preface here, in which Antonio says, "In beginning the research for this compilation of stories about the ghosts of Santa Fe, ABQ, and Taos, I embarked on a journey through my own life, taking a path I had always known but had not traveled for many years. I was forced to reflect on the memories of my childhood and the strong ties of spirituality, the Catholic religion, Native American healing, and the cultural traditions of my own parents. It was once more apparent to me that the indefinite confines of spirits, ghosts, angels, and guardians are ever present and vital to us, the living. If we so choose, their presence in our world can provide a warehouse of direction, intervention, power, and intuition, and knowledge of ourselves, all ready for us to draw from. I was personally concerned about how my readers would react to some of the stories. I was curious about whether I would be taken seriously by non-believers, or conversely, if I would offend believers. My personal perplexities about the subject of ghosts presented an additional hurdle. Would the individuals, the Native Americans, Hispanics, seniors, and religiously pious I chose to interview, grant me the privilege of an interview? While conducting the many interviews of this book, I wove my way through a curtain of cobwebs and spiritual enigmas that ultimately gave way to a clearer understanding of people and their spiritualities. In addition to uncovering ghost stories, I learned of family histories, attitudes, and the wondrous histories of New Mexican towns. I decided at the outset of the project to maintain respect for the thoughts and beliefs of each person interviewed, and I decided that if there ever was a moment during any interview when I felt I might be crossing the border of sensitivity, cultural or otherwise, I would not press the issue. Happily, my own Native American background, Atomi, Mescalero, Apache, afforded me the instinctive moral and intellectual understanding to recognize when I was about to enter another person's space. My interviews provided me with eye-opening experiences as I witnessed the after-effects of encounters with the weird, eerie, spooky, and at times evil. My childhood experiences taught me to be sensitive to the unexplainable yet real glimpses into the life beyond the tangible. In my family, we did not make fun of such subjects as ghosts, hauntings, or brushes with the supernatural. Quite the contrary, my parents taught us to maintain a cautious respect for spirits, folk healers, witches, and forces considered now to be occult in origin. Undoubtedly, my Mescalero Apache grandfather, who was brought to Santa Fe as a child to be educated at the Indian school, provided his daughter, my mother, with a basis for such a positive and respectful view of the paranormal. The stories contained within these pages will forever remain unfinished. We owe it to ourselves to listen with our hearts, to reach across time, and to hear the voices of our departed loved ones who are never truly gone. Death may be eternal, but life is not. Let's treat each other as the precious spirits we truly are. Whenever possible, I've given detailed descriptions of the locations where these events occurred. You are welcome to locate these places, but please respect the privacy and property of the inhabitants. Use common sense and discretion. It is gratifying to know that, amid the silver and turquoise shops, the vendors, the upscale art galleries, and the posh restaurants, deep within the earthen walls of this ancient land of New Mexico, the souls of the dead will not be forgotten. Antonio Garcez, 1998. And just before we jump into the story, I just want to say, Paul, I think that was very similar to my journey when I wrote Strange, right? You want to take people seriously, but you don't want to seem like a kook.
That's always a concern, yes.
Yeah. And it's something I still think about. Yeah, I've been doing this as long as I have. You and I have been doing this as long as we have. But I still, sometimes when I tell people about what I do, there's still that, I've mentioned this before, that sort of sideways glance. And you're like, yep, I know, man. I said what I said. I'm still here. Funny enough, I might have told this story already, but I was having a chat with someone recently, someone whose company I quite enjoy, who I've quite come to enjoy recently. And so I was telling him some ghost stories, or telling him just some work stories, and then I said, well, here, I got one for you. And I told him one of these sort of lengthier stories that you and I have covered on the show, one of my own experiences. And things got real quiet. And I had that moment where I thought, oh, fuck. I went too deep too fast, so to speak. All right. As we said, we're going to tell some stories from this book. And we're going to start, or Paul's going to start us off rather, with the Grant Corner Inn.
In 1905, a colonial-styled home of the railroad era was constructed on the corner of Johnson Street and Grant Avenue for the Windsors, a wealthy New Mexican ranching family. The Windsors lived in the home for a short time, approximately around a year, before it was acquired by the first Presbyterian minister of Grant Avenue's church, the Reverend Moore. Shortly thereafter, Reverend Moore passed away, leaving the house to his widow, Ada Peacock Moore, and their 4 children, Etta, Ada, Ruth, and Mary. Ada Peacock subsequently then married Arthur Robinson, well known in Santa Fe for his spunk and eccentricities. Ada helped the family income by teaching piano in what is now the bathroom, room number 8. Rumour has it that Arthur was fired from his job at the post office for stealing stamps, which earned him a jail sentence. Other stories tell of Arthur Robinson chasing children away from the house, stealing milk from Safeway, and maintaining a decorated Christmas tree in their window all year long. Arthur, after he scraped with the law, miraculously became the Justice of the Peace and maintained an office in what is currently Grant Corner Inn's office. Many Santa Feans reminisce about marriages in the parlour and payment of traffic fines in the office. Art Garcia stayed and worked there for a while, and this is his story of his experiences. In 1980, I was just out of college and living in Seattle. when I decided to return to my hometown of Santa Fe. Through personal contacts, I met the owners of a 3-story house on Grant Street. I moved to my new apartment during the month of March, and my mother and I began the arduous task of cleaning and dusting the entire house. It took the both of us over 3 weeks to make the place livable. Eventually, the second floor was rented to local art students who used the bedrooms as storage and a workspace. They rarely stayed more than a few hours at a time at the house, and always let me know when they were around. Both floors had telephones, so when they were in the house, I either called them or they called me as a courtesy. One evening, I attended a function at a local college and didn't return home until around 11 p.m. I walked up to the 3rd floor, passing through the 2nd floor, which was in total darkness, and there was no sign of anyone other than myself in the entire house. Upon entering my room, I turned on the television set and made myself a snack. Just as I finished my sandwich, I heard sounds of movement coming from the floor below me. Soon, the sounds increased in volume and took on a piercing, roaring quality. The thought crossed my mind, could those art students be the cause of all this racket? The students I knew were a courteous group, and because of this I was quite certain they wouldn't have made such a commotion at such a late hour. Furthermore, they'd never worked this late into the night. After about 10 minutes of listening to the disturbing clamour of doors opening and slamming shut, and large heavy objects dropping on the floor, I'd had enough. I telephoned the flat below to ask the students about the noise, but the phone just rang and rang. I could even hear the phone ringing through my floor, and then the noise stopped. Receiving no answer, I decided it must be burglars, so I hung up the phone and switched off the television. From my 3rd floor apartment there was no way out except to go through the 2nd floor or to jump, so I sat tight. I decided to call my father, and as I was describing the experience to him, the noises began again. But this time the sounds were now overhead, on the roof. This noise was deafening, constant pounding that reverberated throughout the 3rd floor. My father said he'd be right over, so I hung up and listened to what sounded like someone's footsteps walking over the roof. They were so loud, they were enveloping the entire 3rd floor. When the noise subsided some, I called my parents home again. My mother had told me that my father was on his way over to me. So I hung up and telephoned the police and reported a burglary in progress. Soon I saw the flashing blue and red lights on the patrol car pulling up in front of the house. As I withdrew from the window and turned to the direction of the stairwell leading below, I smelt a faint yet extremely foul odour. I had to place my hand over my mouth to keep from disgorging the contents of my stomach. I took 2 steps into the stairwell when I heard the sound of a door on the 2nd floor open and slam shut. I stopped, grabbed hold of the handrail, and peeked over to the floor below. I waited, expecting to see a police officer, but instead I heard the sound of footsteps approaching the stairs. The footsteps stopped, and then suddenly the sound began ascending the stairs towards me. I stared into the darkness, but I saw nothing. The footsteps were loud and the sounds echoed off the walls. I froze. All at once, I felt a cold, bone-chilling rush of air speed past me, followed by the overpowering stench of rotted meat. It smelled as if a large carcass of decomposing animal, with its entrails exposed and bubbling with the wrath of death, was upon me. This wafting, invisible fog of decay became stronger as each footstep came nearer. Soon, it seemed as though the footsteps were just a few feet in front of me. Then suddenly, something invisible shoved my shoulder with tremendous force, as if pushing me out of the way. I grabbed the banister to steady myself and decided to make my escape. I ran down the stairs to the front door, where I met the police, who were just about to ring the doorbell. The police entered and searched every room in the house, and they discovered nothing. Soon my father arrived and helped me lock every door and window, and then we drove to my parents' house where I spent that night. The following day, I returned to the house on Grant Street, but for my own peace of mind, I brought my parents along. We walked through the house together, checking every corner. As I began to climb to the 3rd floor, I noticed that on the stairs, all of the beautiful large potted plants I'd cared for were completely wilted. I looked closer and realised that the leaves and stems had somehow frozen. I was completely baffled. The steam heaters that had been left on overnight and the house was comfortably warm. Entering my bedroom, my large tropical plants resembled defrosted frozen vegetables, limp and soggy. I searched throughout the third floor for a draft or some other source, but found nothing. Alone in the house again that evening, I turned on the television to watch my favourite comedy show. Once again at approximately 11 p.m, I heard the movement on the floor below me. I immediately turned the television off. There was no doubt the noises from the night before were back, but this time the sounds started up very quickly, as if in vengeance. Soon the sounds, the loud slamming of doors and pounding on the walls, were deafening. I had to do something, so I again phoned the police. I wasn't about to report a ghost, so again I said that probably a burglar was in the house. As the noises reached a climax, I decided not to stay a minute longer. I made my way down the stairs and out the front door to my car. Outside in the car, I felt safe as I drove to my parents' house and spent the night. In the safety of my parents' living room, I phoned the police department and asked to speak to the officer who had responded to my burglary call. The officer informed me that as he approached the house, he saw blinking lights on both the first and second floors. A light seemed to be moving rapidly from room to room, as if someone was carrying a lantern. For 5 more nights I attempted, with all my willpower, to spend a quiet, normal evening at the haunted house. But as soon as the 11th hour struck, the slamming and pounding commenced, and once again, off I would go to the comfort and safety of my parents' home. My nerves were frayed, but I felt I had to prove to myself that I had some semblance of courage within me. On the 6th night, I turned on all the lights on my floor and waited for the loathsome sounds, and nothing happened. After that night, I experienced continued peace for a full week. Then, abruptly, the noises started up again, and I questioned my own sanity. Could I be having a nervous breakdown? Perhaps I was just imagining the whole thing. I would lie awake at night for hours until my fatigued body would finally doze off. Each morning it took all of my strength I could muster just to get out of bed. I would arrive at work with dark circles under my eyes. My co-workers and friends began inquiring about my health, and at this point I consulted a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said that I appeared to be under a tremendous amount of stress, but there was no pathological problem. He felt I was quite normal. As the days and nights passed, I decided to get a housemate, and a short time later, 2 friends of mine moved in. Soon, we all began to see and hear unexplainable phenomena. Sometimes lights would turn off and on in empty rooms, at all hours of the day and night.
Did you hear that? Because I'm editing the show right now, and I'm just, for the first time, hearing that, and I can't figure out what is happening behind Paul's voice. If you know, or if you have any theories, shoot me a message, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. Paul and I don't have an opportunity to talk about it on the show because I'm only just hearing it now, several days after we recorded it. But I'll play it, and then again, I'll just quickly ask for your thoughts.
At all hours of the day and night. At all hours of the day and night.
You hear that, right? It's kind of behind his voice. I've checked the video. I am not speaking when it happens, and the audio itself is only on his side of the recording. So I don't really know. I'm always hesitant to say, EVP, because I think these things, there's a million things that can go wrong when you're recording a show, especially over the internet. But it does seem unusual. And so I wanted to just stop the show real quick in case you folks heard it too, and just put a bug in your ear, have you guys think about it. And again, Paul and I will talk about it, if not on the next Talk Spooky, on episode 235, and I would love to hear what you think. Okay, back to Paul's story.
We heard the sound of several human voices coming from the empty floor below. Often we heard laughter in empty rooms on our own floor, and from the floor below we heard the toilet flush and doors opening and closing. At times, the scent of a rancid, flowery perfume preceded these unexplained sounds. Whenever I recall that odour, I still get goosebumps. My brother, who at the time was a city police officer, visited several times and personally witnessed these events. On the first and second floors, we actually saw a doorknob turn and the door open, only to slam shut, all on its own. On several occasions my mother grabbed a doorknob to open a door and felt that the door was being pulled away from her. However, my mother shouted, "You're not going to win this one." She then pulled with all her strength using 2 hands until the door gave. My roommates had similar experiences, but they were not insistent at pursuing a ghostly tug-of-war. Initially, my 2 housemates found the unusual incidents amusing. However, they soon grew tired of the situation and decided to seek other living quarters. The day they moved out, another friend, Ken, and his cat Missy moved in. On several occasions, Ken and I observed Missy walk into a room and then suddenly arch her back and hiss loudly at an invisible enemy. As every hair on her body and tail stood out straight, Missy backed out of the room. Ken and I looked at each other, but said nothing. At other times I'd put a record on the stereo, but soon the arm would be lifted off the record and the stereo turned off. Another time, one evening when I was watching television, a gust of wind entered the room and suddenly and violently swung all the hanging plants and light fixtures. Loose papers went flying in all directions. And then, as suddenly as it began, the strange wind ceased. I checked all the windows, but each was shut tight. I found no way that a wind with such force could have entered the room. A new series of incidents began soon after. Once while taking a shower, I suddenly heard a woman's voice laughing loudly. I immediately parted the shower curtain and peeked out, but saw no one. However, there was another time when I did see something out of place. I'd been asleep but was awakened by a noise in the bedroom. I slowly opened my eyes and saw a white shadowy figure moving along the wall. I froze and didn't move a muscle. As I stared at this figure, it began to laugh. It was the same laughter I'd heard before whilst I was in the shower. The figure made this laughing sound, but made no movement. Then the laughter suddenly turned to crying, and the figure moved closer to my bed. As it stood next to my bed, it slowly dissolved until it had totally vanished. But as soon as it disappeared, I felt the mattress at the foot of my bed depress, as if someone was sitting down on it. I grabbed the blankets and covered my head. My heart was pounding hard in my chest. This was more frightening than anything I'd experienced before. Not long after that experience, I received a call from a priest from the local Guadalupe parish. He said my aunt, Ruby Sandoval, had discussed my situation with him and, concerned for my safety, had requested he talk with me. I agreed to meet him, and he agreed to keep our conversation in the strictest confidence. When I met the priest, I was surprised at his young age. He began asking me questions about my personal beliefs and whether I had ever studied or was interested in demonology, Satanism, witchcraft, or the occult. I told him no, and then he questioned me about the events I'd experienced at the house on Grant Street. I told him everything, and at the close of his visit he said he'd like to conduct a blessing at the house. I had no problems with this suggestion and agreed to a house blessing on the following evening. At work the next day, I described my meeting with the priest to a co-worker, Jean. When she heard about the happenings at the house and the planned blessing, she asked to be present to serve as a witness. I agreed, and that evening both Jean and I sat in the bedroom awaiting the priest's arrival. Soon his car pulled up. We hurried downstairs and met him as he was walking up the front porch. steps. As soon as he entered my apartment, he began to dress for the ceremony, putting on his chasuble and vestment stole. Next he brought out holy water and began sprinkling the room. The moment he sprinkled the water towards the living room, we heard a loud crackling sound like splitting wood, followed by a loud bang. Making no effort to mask our astonished looks, Jean and I looked at each other in fear. The priest, undaunted, continued the blessing, moving solemnly from room to room throughout the entire house, from the attic to the basement. Since the night of the blessing, I've moved, and I've had no more negative experiences with slamming doors, pounding on the walls, or rotten odours. I became convinced that the blessing had removed or quieted whatever had been in that house, and I enjoyed the peace that prevailed throughout it. Several weeks later, I left for the West Coast, and my parents assumed the task of checking on the empty house on Grant Street. Each night between 9 and 10 p.m, they drove by the building to make certain all was well. When I returned, I asked my parents about the welfare of the building. My mother's voice became quite concerned as she described what they'd seen. On several occasions, as they drove by the house, they saw the figure of a man standing in one of the windows on the 3rd floor. He seemed to be staring at the street. My parents called my brother, the one who was the police officer, and he too witnessed this figure. When my brother arrived, they all entered the building to investigate, but found no one there and nothing out of place. A few days later, just by chance, I met a couple in town who had lived in the house before I had. They informed me that they too had experienced similar strange phenomena. Their unearthly experiences eventually drove them to move out. During their move, as they began to pack room by room, a very strange thing took place. They would complete one room, neatly stacking the filled boxes, and then would move on to work in another room. Strangely, whenever they returned to the finished room, they found that their packed boxes had been emptied and the contents strewn all about. Not long after this incident, a woman who claimed to be a clairvoyant visited me. She just knocked on the door one day and informed me of her world-renowned acclaim as a medium. I invited her in, and as soon as she entered the building, she said she felt vibrations. I led her to the 1st floor living room and we sat down. She began to breathe slowly and deeply. Then she paused and with closed eyes began to describe people she identified as lost souls existing in the house. She said she was seeing 2 female figures and a male figure standing off to one side, observing us. Of the 2 females, the older appeared to be angry, given her harsh movements. The clairvoyant said that she couldn't understand what the younger woman and man were saying, but the older woman told her that she'd been trapped on the 2nd floor, and no matter what she did, she could not free herself. Soon, the clairvoyant opened her eyes and told me that the spirits needed help in order to understand that they had to go on with the process of death. She told me that these spirits were reliving their past lives with great energy. After the clairvoyant ended her observation and visit, she left, and I never heard from her again. Days after, I continued to dwell on what the clairvoyant had told me, and I finally made the decision to move out of the house. I gathered boxes and packed my belongings. I stacked the boxes in the middle of the bedroom and went to get some lunch. A few minutes later, when I returned, I found the boxes opened and the contents had been tossed all about the room. My books, however, had been neatly stacked into small piles on the floor beside the empty boxes. I recalled the experience of the former families they tried to leave the house, and I became even more determined to move. I found a home and settled on the western side of Santa Fe, where I now live. Just a few years after I moved out, I learned something very interesting about the original owners of the house on Grant Street. Apparently, the husband was a postal worker, and he kept his wife, a paraplegic, on the 2nd floor. I cannot verify the accuracy of this information, but it does coincide with what the clairvoyant had said. I also learned that their daughter, who had lived in the house in the 1970s, was killed with her husband in an automobile accident. Since the day I moved out, I've never returned to the Grant Street house. I've no desire to go back. The memories of my experiences there still remain very fresh in my mind. I'm pleased that the present owners transformed the house into a luxurious bed and breakfast, because it was a beautiful home, and now it's even more special. Along with my memories, I frequently dream about the time I lived there, and I constantly live with the fear of knowing that someone or something is forever watching me.
There is so much going on there. One of the things that occurred to me right off the bat is make up your fucking mind, Ghost. You either want me out or you want me to stay. If you want me out, stop unpacking my shit. And if you want me to stay, stop being weird.
It's a strange one. I mean, especially when you've got something that seems to be, you could set your watch to it. It seems as regular as clockwork. And then it stops for a bit. And then it starts up again doing the same thing. But it doesn't kind of clarify what's going on with the roof. I can understand the rest of the building, but what's on the roof? Why is there somebody running about on the roof? What's all that about?
I mean, I guess it's always such, like, the upstairs is always a feature of ghost stories. So maybe this is just, footsteps on the ceiling, footsteps on the roof. I mean, my friends had that, actually. I've mentioned their place a number of times. They used to live on Fairfield Road in Victoria, and they would hear stuff on the above them, but above them was the roof. They were on the top floor.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there's something walks about in my mum's attic, and it's not big enough for you to walk about in, stood up.
Well, remember, someone solved that for us. It's just rats bumping their backsides on the bottom of boards.
Of course it is. Yeah. Yeah, of course
Just
it is.
a lot of very thick rats.
Having lived in a house with rats as a young child, I can tell you I know exactly what a rat sounds like. And it doesn't sound like that.
No.
Because they're noisy bastards.
Nick has what she calls the sanctuary outside our apartment. So she's got a wildlife cam set up there, and she feeds the local raccoons and things like this. And please don't email me and tell me that's bad. It's irrelevant.
Feeding them magic mushrooms.
Exactly. We're expanding their consciousness. They're gonna be coming in and telling me about simulation theory next. Tear out what's left of my hair.
Do you think we're in the Matrix?
Oh God. But no. She also has this one rat that comes back. It does not come in. We have had rats over the years come into the apartment, but funny enough, ever since she started doing this, that has never been an issue. But she'll tell me, "Oh, Ratatouille came by last night." That's of course what she calls him. However, our upstairs neighbors do not have as laid back an attitude about the natural world as we do. And so when every now and again we'll get a text from them saying something to the effect of, "We saw a rat in your yard. We're calling the exterminators." Okay. I mean, I can't stop you, but that seems overkill for a rat who you're on the second floor, if I'm not mistaken. He does not appear to be wearing a Spider-Man outfit, but do what you got to do. They're very nice people, so I just assume they have a thing about rats.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, a rat can climb up a wall, no problem.
Shut up, Paul. You're killing me.
I'm just saying. Do you know if rats get stuck behind another rat that's too fat or something, they'll just eat through it?
Okay. Well, they look cute, but apparently they're real sons of bitches.
Yeah, well, they're like mice. They've got to keep chewing. It's why they eat all the time, because their teeth don't stop growing.
Oh, okay.
That's why they're always gnawing stuff.
Oh, okay, man. What's my excuse then? Actually, just before we move on, there was a kind of a funny thing. So as I mentioned to you off air, and I wasn't going to mention, but this is a fun story. So my friend Charlie passed in the last couple of days. She was older, but still a very cool lady. She was originally from Southern Illinois, but when I met her, she had just retired from being a public defender in Minneapolis. And she and her husband Bob would have us over for dinner quite a bit. And she loved cooking Tex-Mex food because most of her family was in Texas. And so she would quite often make this sort of pork roast thing with a lot of cheese and a lot of peppers. And she always had this hot sauce there. I think it was El Yucateca or something, but it was this like sludgy green hot sauce.
Lovely.
Yeah, it was. I loved it. I love the shit. And this is an example of like, put it in front of me. So maybe I would eat through another rat if you put it in front of me. I'm not sure. But I would always put the stuff all over the food. All over the food. And invariably, because I would also be drinking, because she would always make margaritas, Nick would have to drive. And invariably, I'd be saying to Nick, "Drive faster," because I had so much hot sauce, I'm about to shit myself. It just never failed. I would always eat too much of this hot sauce. And I'd just be sitting there going, oh, it hurts. And they'd watch me do it every time, and they'd just kind of chuckle and shake their heads.
Have you thought about investing in some corks?
I'm smarter about what I eat now. I backed off on eating a lot of the spicy food. Oh, man. Stupid. What could go wrong? Bunch of fiber, bunch of hot sauce. Oh, no. Oh, man. She was something else. Just, it had no filter whatsoever, which she was very progressive. Her and Bob they marched in the 60s and things like this, but you put her in the modern world, and sometimes even then she would say stuff. And I remember one time we were in a restaurant, and there was an elderly gentleman with a very young, very attractive young lady who I suspect may have been compensated company. And so Charlie, I mentioned this to Nick, and Nick's like, oh yeah, but kind of, yeah, wouldn't surprise me, And then Charlie heard us say this, like, oh, what? Oh my God, you're right. She must be a prostitute. She's got prostitutes, and just like, Jesus Christ, you please, the prostitute, and just loud enough in the fields far away, deer are running away. Avalanches are crashing down from the hills. Prostitute, echoing out through the valleys.
Look at those two reshooting Pretty Woman.
Yeah, it more or less. And she didn't realize she was being loud. She never knew. She just had no sense of the volume of her voice. Oh, yeah, man.
You've got to be careful when you, especially if I remember once saying to my friend when I was being harassed by this, someone I didn't appreciate their attention, shall we say. And so I turned around and went, why do I always pull nutters at the exact moment that the music stopped?
No!
So it wasn't even quite, it was like, why do I always?
Oh.
However, it did have the effect, and they buggered off, thankfully.
Oh, well, that's something. That's something.
It was, took one for the team there.
So yeah, folks, if I'm a little funny, that's why I lost someone recently. Again, someone new. It's an ongoing process, but she was a cool lady. But yeah. Moving on, one last thing from the story. It occurred to me that this guy found a good priest. In my life, I've met two cool priests, one of whom called me the devil when I was playing cards with him, and I kept beating him. That was fun. Down in Portland, I don't remember what parish he was from or what church he was from, but he seemed like a solid guy. And the other one was a dude who passed through Revelstoke. But one time when I was actually in spiritual need, when I was kind of getting into the paranormal, and the first book had come out, and I wanted to do some more research, but I really felt like I kept brushing up against these shadow creatures and shit like this, and I didn't know who to talk to. So I had got a phone call from a handyman who worked in a Catholic church about 2 blocks from my office. And when I called him back, he's like, he called me. And he's like, hey, why'd you call me? I said, I don't know who you are, and I've never called you in my life. But he had a missed call from me on his phone. I did not have an outbound call going to him. So presumably someone spoofed my number, is my guess. But it turned out he was a handyman in this Catholic church. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is like a sign. Maybe this is someone sending me, I've seen enough horror movies. You go talk to the Catholics, they help you out. They help you point you in the right direction. I keep bumping up into darkness. Maybe I'll go talk to this priest and we'll see what he's got to say. So I went to the Catholic church, and you know what that priest said to me? Barely looking up from whatever the fuck it was he was doing, eating a plate of spaghetti, jerking off, whatever it was. I don't even remember what he was doing. I just remember the total disdain with which he barely glanced up from it towards me and said, we're doing a course on Jesus next week. You should go do that. Yeah, I should go to a fucking PowerPoint seminar on Jesus.
Only if
that's going to help. Cool.
I hope it's free.
Is lunch provided? It wasn't. That's the other thing. It wasn't free.
That's not very Christian.
Jesus saves for $29.99.
It's what he would have wanted. Let's monetize.
Paul, my disciple, come to me. Make sure to get market rate for anything involving my likeness.
New Jesus Bitcoin.
Gcoin. Oh, man.
Turn your life savings into nothing. Invest in Gcoin.
Worked for the Hawk Tool, lady. It can work for the savior of all mankind.
How does a handyman work for the church then? They're not allowed hammer and nails anyway. You have to use no more nails glue.
They've got to put a blanket over the Jesus' head whenever he has to do any repairs. Like a bird of prey, just goes, sleep, Jesus.
Does
what he's got to do. Yeah, little hood, yep.
Get Jesus' hood, everyone. We've got some shelves to put up.
Imagining Tim the Toolman Taylor just gently placing a cloth over the head of the Lord of this world.
It's okay.
Rockabye, Jesus. Hey, we should probably stop with the last one.
Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. That's not nails you hear. Kumbaya.
All right, well, while I say a few Hail Marys and a Novena for my damned friend here, we're going to take a quick break for some ads. Dona Leticia. One hot August day, I interviewed Alberto Serna. We sat on his front porch, and as we talked, Daniel, Alberto's 17-year-old son, sat with us and listened intently to his father's story of Dona Leticia, a witch. Frequently, Alberto would pause and reflect upon other memories awakened as he related his story. At these times, Daniel would ask his father to explain further, to provide small details of these family memories. I personally enjoyed these moments and appreciated being present as an oral tradition was transferred from one generation to another. Now in his 50s, Alberto related a brief incident that occurred 6 years previously when he returned to his old neighborhood. On that day, standing in the place of the former homes of his neighbors, including Dona Leticia's house, he found only scattered bushes of chamisa and dust. But as he walked back to his car, he spotted a large black raven standing on a boulder. It cawed several times, then abruptly lifted off and flew away. When I asked Alberto what he took this to mean, he answered, "I knew it was just that old witch letting me know she's still around, to this very day." This is Alberto Serna's story. My name is Alberto Serna, and I am the oldest of 4 brothers. My family and I once lived in a little settlement 3 miles northeast of Santa Fe. My grandfather had built our home of adobe in 1918, and when he died in 1953, he passed it to my mother, who already had a growing family of her own. Years later, soon after the family sold the land to the New Mexico Highway Department, his home, as well as Dona Leticia's, was demolished. I now live on the west side of Santa Fe and have 2 sons. As a child of 15, I had already learned of ghosts and witches through the stories passed from one generation to the next, including stories of the famous La Llorona. So when my father took me aside and told me of Dona Leticia, a neighbor who lived about a quarter of a mile east of our home, I was not surprised by my father's lecture. He warned me to avoid the old spinster and stay away from her home. When I asked why, he replied simply, "Es una bruja." She is a witch. He told me that he had always suspected her of witchcraft, but hadn't any proof until his friend Juan told him how Dona Leticia had given his brother El Mal Ojo, the evil eye. My father said that Juan's brother had become bedridden and remained that way for a month until his wife tearfully beseeched Dona Leticia and offered her cash to remove the spell. I also learned that Dona Leticia had a small wooden box in which she kept some sort of animal that she could manipulate to work her magic. The witch fed the animal a concoction of herbs, threads from an intended victim's clothes or strands of hair, and drops of her own blood. I listened intently to my father's words and promised never to go near the witch's house. Ever. About a month later, neighbors received the news that, while en route to Albuquerque with a close friend, Dona Leticia's cart had turned over and she had broken her back. She died the following day. Because my parents were held in high regard in our community, Dona Leticia's only surviving relative, a 73-year-old brother from Taos, gave them the opportunity to buy Dona Leticia's house and land for a reduced price. None of the neighbors wanted anything to do with the place, so, because my parents had saved up a few extra dollars, they purchased a small homestead with the intention of fixing it up and renting it. Once Dona Leticia's brother had removed most of her belongings and left for Taos, my parents and I entered the house. Apparently, in his haste, the brother had disturbed a floorboard in the bedroom. I removed the board and found a small wooden box with a faded green patina. The inside of the box was lined in red cloth. Lying on the cloth was a black, coiled, shriveled worm. I assumed that this was the animal my father had told me about. When I showed the box to my parents, my mother immediately made the sign of the cross and harshly instructed me to take that thing outside. My father followed me out of the house and around to the back. Then he gathered some old boards that were lying in the yard and built a fire. Once the fire was roaring, he threw the box into the flames. I watched the passion of the fire consume the green box and its twisted black contents. Many months later, after painting, fixing the plumbing, and sprucing up the property, my parents finally rented the house to an older couple from Colorado. For the first few days, they seemed to be enjoying the place, but within 2 weeks, they moved out. The woman said she was bothered by nightmares. Just a few days later, a group of family members and friends from the Chama area came to visit, so my mother offered to put them up at our house and have my younger brothers and me sleep in Dona Leticia's house. That night, we went off to the old witch's house. My father would join us later. We spent the early part of the evening listening to an old radio, but as the night grew darker, I heard soft crying coming from the bedroom. I lowered the volume on the radio to hear better, and we all clearly heard a baby crying. As I got up to investigate, on the wall of the hallway, I saw the shadows of 3 tall cat-like creatures standing upright. As I approached the shadows that glided across the wall, I stood still. Then I heard what seemed to be an argument among the creatures. They were speaking in women's voices. I ran back to the living room, grabbed my brother's hands, and dashed home. I was shaking and sobbing when I reached the house. I told my mother, in front of all our visitors, what I had experienced. My father, his brother, and his godfather decided to spend the night at the old woman's house instead. Later that night, I was awakened by familiar voices. My father and the 2 men had returned to the house. My mother grabbed blankets, one was mine, and set the men up on the floor of our house. In the morning, my father described what had taken place the night before. He said that they had been joking and preparing their beds when they heard what sounded like a large dog scratching at the front door. My father opened the door slightly but saw nothing. However, as he turned towards the other men, something streaked into the house through the partially open door. All 3 men saw a flash of black head for the bedroom. As they followed it, they suddenly heard the loud, piercing voice of a woman, "Fuera de mi casa," out of my house. Then the men saw the shadowy figure of a woman materialize and approach them, and a cold rush of air tried to push them out of the bedroom. They all scrambled out the front door and ran to our house, waking me from my sleep. Since that night, our family only ventured to Dona Leticia's house during daylight hours. Unable and unwilling to use the house for family, my parents have rented it several times throughout the years, but inevitably the renters would leave, citing strange happenings or claiming that they saw or heard an unknown woman moving about in the house. Once, my parents brought a medicine man from San Juan Pueblo who performed a blessing ceremony on the house. This settled things down for a while, but we'll never know if Dona Leticia's presence has been completely removed. Soon after the blessing, my parents sold the house to the New Mexico Highway Department, and it was razed. My hope is that the bulldozer destroyed Dona Leticia's evil presence along with the houses. Now, I'm not much for witch stories, Paul, because by and large, witches are just cool ladies who want to be left alone on their own in the woods. But this does sound kind of fucking sinister.
Well, if you're going to encounter any in a state in the States, New Mexico is the place that it will probably happen.
And of course, for all of our Spanish language listeners, I apologize because I'm no doubt mangling the shit out of my Spanish. Undoubtedly, as I was saying the line there, the fuera de mi casa, I'm like, that sounds like I'm Italian, but that's fine. It's whatever. Buongiorno, whatever, that's fine. But,
Buongiorno.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Brad Pitt in Inglourious Bastards. Margarete. Yeah, so
Ciao.
please know that we're trying. This is just the best we can do. It's like when we had all the stuff from, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Spaceman Ray Ray from Instagram, when he sent the story, his mother sent her story from India. It was a real Charlie Brown's Christmas in terms of pronunciations.
Got to give it a go.
That's it. You got to try. I mean, this does sound like an intense haunting. This does sound like a scary, no fuck around kind of deal.
I mean, New Mexico is a state I've learnt a lot about since doing the show. It's quite a contradiction because I think people often look at it as a kind of backwater dust bowl, but it's extremely historic. It's got numerous myths and legends. It's a complete smorgasbord of Latina and American culture mashing together in probably the way that it doesn't happen in any other state in America. It's become a real sort of melting pot of modern art. I know a couple of the places there are real big sort of artist retreats, and it just seems to be the kind of place that attracts people who think outside the box more than others. And I think people are very surprised when they go to New Mexico. Whether they think it's all like it was in the days when Billy the Kid or Blackjack Ketchum was running amok there 150 years ago, I'm not really sure, but it's certainly not the place you might remember from certain cowboy films.
No. I've only spent a limited amount of time in New Mexico. Famously, I like to joke that my experience of Albuquerque was an IHOP in the rain. But I did spend some time in Santa Fe, actually with meeting some folks that I met through Bob and Charlie, the friends I mentioned earlier. There was a couple, Hud and Donna. I think they're both retired professors. And I ended up hooking up with them when Mike and I passed through there 10, 12 years ago now. But it's a really beautiful little city, Santa Fe. We stayed at this place called the Silver Saddle Motel. And it was, I mean, it's an intentionally cultivated image, but the place looks like it's plucked right out of the 50s. I remember when we got there, we had driven from Cortez, Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. We had to leave early because we went to the Anasazi Cliff Dwellings. So we went to check those out, which is an incredible place to be. But we had to leave early. They had to end the tour early, as I recall, because there was a massive snowstorm moving in. And so we were supposed to meet Hud and Donna in Santa Fe on X Day, but the snowstorm was so terrible that we actually had several times to pull over to the side of the road because you simply could not see what was coming. You could not see a goddamn thing. And I remember for the remainder of the time we were in New Mexico, it rained, which I was not expecting. And driving around Santa Fe at night in the rain was an experience. It felt very active. It felt like a place that, there's a lot of things moving kind of just beyond your ability to see.
I can imagine. I'm always intrigued because obviously the Paranormal Rangers, the two chaps from the Unexplained Mysteries episode, Stanley Milford Jr. and his partner, that's their neck of the woods as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because they are the Navajo paranormal team, aren't they? They work on the reservation. Of
course. Whenever I think Navajo, I always think of Arizona for some reason. Oh, only Arizona.
So, yeah, no wonder Bigfoot pops down to have a check now and again.
Really? Down to New Mexico?
Yeah, Bigfoot sightings. There's some very odd ones in Stanley Milford's book, Paranormal Ranger, and they talk about a couple on the Unsolved Mysteries episode.
No kidding.
Yeah, one of them didn't like somebody's... They built like a little sort of sun trap outside, and something came along in the night and just pulled it all down. Didn't like it. Trying to get in one of the trailers, you could see the door handle going and shit.
Jesus, full on Exist vibes.
Yeah, there's a lot more to New Mexico than Roswell.
And it's funny, I always forget that Roswell's even a thing. I mean, where do you stand on that? Just quickly, do you think Roswell was actually something unusual, or do you think it's it was either like test craft, weather balloon, whatever?
I don't believe the government's response to it.
Okay.
But I also don't think it's as relevant as people make out, shall we say.
Okay.
Because what people forget is nobody spoke about Roswell for 30 years. It wasn't during all the 50s and 60s, people were not going on about Roswell at all. At all. It's only the late 70s when Jesse Marcel did his famous interviews when he was dying and started giving that and gave that interview on In Search Of, which I think was about 1979.
Oh, okay.
And then from that point on, that's when there was a big flap because it was in the newspapers at the time. This is well reported that the newspaper said that the US had caught a UFO. It was reported nationally. It was on the radio. And yet it kind of just drifted away. And then there were so many other stories that happened in the 40s and 50s and 60s that people didn't really think it was anything that special. And it was only when he came forward and started talking about it, and that started pulling people in. Because Roswell didn't even embrace ufology till about 92. This is another thing that it's so synonymous now with aliens because every street lamp is like a UFO. The McDonald's there is a UFO-shaped building. They've got a brilliant museum there. But that's all happened since 1992.
Ah, okay.
So whilst there were bits and bats and people spoke about it, it wasn't what it is now. It's developed. And some would say, well, that's quite cynical. But if you've got that attachment to you and you've got weird people turning up who smell a little bit of weed asking you about the aliens, then you think, hang on a minute, can we not make these people spend some money here rather than just buggering off to Albuquerque or something?
I think a little bit is generous, but yeah.
I think looking at some of those early UFO investigators, I think that some of them were on something slightly stronger. Guadalupe and La Llorona. It happened one hot day in 1931 when I went for a walk with my brothers and a few neighbourhood friends to the Santa Fe River. Even though it was 4 miles away, we didn't mind the walk because it would end in refreshment at the cool river. Before leaving, I gathered up my white puppy, who had been resting in the shade of a pinyon tree, and then ran to catch up with the others. When we reached the river, my brothers began throwing small stones into the swirling eddies. I put my pee-wee ball of fur on the ground and joined in the game. After a few minutes, the sun beating down on my exposed head made me nauseated, and I sought some shade under nearby willow trees. My puppy joined me as I dug up the reddish-brown mud from the water's edge to make mud people. I fashioned their bodies of mud, using twigs for the arms and legs, leaves for dresses, and small flat stones for boys' hats. I could see and hear my brothers and their friends laughing and carrying on, but I was content to play house with my mud dolls and my puppy. Suddenly, while I was arranging the dolls in a circle, a strong gust of wind enveloped me, and the surrounding cattails and bulrushes swayed violently. Then I heard the sound of bells making a sweet tinkling noise. Captivated by the ringing, I stopped playing and listened. As I turned to tell my brothers about the bells, I saw that they too had noticed the sounds, for they were standing together, gazing at the sky. The sound of the bells got louder and louder, and my little puppy, who stood at my side, began to bark, then ran off into a large clump of cattails. I tried to go after him, but I discovered I couldn't move a muscle. I was mesmerised by the sound of the bells for at least a minute. Then the tinkle of the bells subsided, and in the sudden silence I heard a woman gently sobbing and calling, "Maya, Maya." Suddenly I was able to move. So I stood up and I called to my brothers. They rushed to my side and took me by my hand. From the feeling of fear that gripped me, I knew that this was something evil. We all raced home. I soon learned that my brothers and the other children had also heard the woman crying and beseeching, but to them she had called out, "Mijillos, mijillos." Once I was safe at home, I realised I'd lost my puppy, and I cried because I was certain it must have drowned. After we explained what had happened, my mother said we had done the right thing for leaving that place. She said that from our descriptions, she believed something evil had happened. My parents decided to personally make a visit to the spot where we'd heard the weeping. I was apprehensive about returning, but at the same time I was anxious to find my puppy. As my father was getting the horses ready, I heard my mother whisper to him, "La Llorona." When we arrived at the river, the sun was hanging heavy and tired in the western sky, and as we approached the river's edge, we all suddenly heard the ghostly woman's voice once more. Deep within each of us, we felt her sense of urgency as she cried loudly for her children, "Mijillos, mijillos."
And just heads up for this one, just do the father's lines in English. We won't bother with the Spanish.
Good.
I won't do that to you, and we won't do that to our audience.
My father called out to her, "Who are you? Where are you? What do you want?" He received no reply, so my mother shouted, "Leave my children alone, daughter of the devil." My mother then made the sign of the cross and called to us, "Manos," and off we went. But in our haste, the horse my mother and I were riding tripped, and I fell into the mud, hands first. As both my parents came to help me, one of my brothers shouted for us to look to the direction of the river. We all turned and saw the apparition of La Llorona with her arms outstretched, walking towards us. The setting sun had cast a deep red, orange, gold glow on the river, and we clearly saw this ghost woman walking on its surface. My father yelled for us to hurry, and we quickly made our way back home. As soon as we got back, my parents alerted the neighbourhood to the danger at the river. They told everyone what we had witnessed, and warned them to keep a close watch on their children. Most people think La Llorona makes her presence known only at night, but I'm here to tell everyone that evil can choose day or night to come forth. To this day I clearly recall that phantom woman walking on the water and crying for her children.
And I think that's a great point. You know, again, we have a very set idea in our heads, many of us, about what is a ghost story, right? What's a spooky moment? And it's dark and it's creepy and it's this or it's that. And it's like, man, creepy can happen day or night. Actually, I had a moment. It wasn't even paranormal, but it was a very scary daytime moment. Or I shouldn't say very, but it was a very unnerving daytime moment. I recently went up to the town of St. Mary's to check out this vintage store up there. It's incredible. It's a warren of stuff. I can't imagine anyone needing half of it, 3/4 of it, I should say. One of those places where the wall, it's about this wide, and you're just kind of moving through very narrow aisles. But the guy who runs the place is this little old dude. Used to be a teacher, very friendly fella. We had a nice chat when I was there. But shortly after I came in, we heard the door go again, and he goes, "Oh, is that person with you?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm here by myself." And the guy who came in there was not exactly the kind of guy you expect to see in a vintage shop. I mean, I'm not exactly the first candidate there, with my white supremacist hairdo. But, you think he's really just an overgrown hipster. We can probably handle this. But this was a dude who had one of those voices that sounds like he's been gargling glass.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. And he stunk of that nicotine, like cigarettes and booze. And he was quite a wide-framed guy. And there was just this kind of crackling tension in the air. He claimed to just be looking, but I could tell this little dude was not exactly thrilled to have him there, but he also couldn't tell him to leave because he hadn't done anything wrong. And it was just one of those moments where you're not sure what's going to happen next. And that's almost, to me, sometimes scarier than seeing, a ghost or whatever, because the consequences of that are so much more real, Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But it's also, it's one of those things. The thing about La Llorona is I've seen people say, "Oh, well, it's a modern invention. The first written story poem about La Llorona is from 1849.
Oh, geez.
Which was written by a Mexican gentleman, I believe, called Manuel Hernandez.
Okay.
And that was published in 1849 in Spanish, and then I think it was translated into English about 20 years later. So the belief in La Llorona has been around as long as people have lived in that region, I would suggest. And obviously it also crosses the border. But there are obviously large pockets of Hispanic people all over the States. And I know it's certainly in California and Nevada, there are those communities there that have La Llorona has gone with them.
Sure.
So it's often dismissed as this kind of cultural connection to the motherland and all that nonsense. But she's been around forever, and obviously the story is as old as time. But there is a real belief, especially in New Mexico, bodies of water you will encounter La Llorona and her kin, because she's not the only one. There are lots and lots of ghosts of this ilk in New Mexico. John LeMay wrote a brilliant book a couple of years ago called La Llorona, Her Kith and Kin, which covers a wide variety of these weird ghost witch stories from that region, and there's dozens of them. She's just the poster child for terrifying baby-longing spirits.
I always think about that. I think about, what if we're talking about something that just presents to us a certain image because that is what it finds most, what's that? Is it the anglerfish that's got the light it kind of uses to dupe other fish into coming towards it, or whatever it's preying coming towards it, and then it kind of, it comes at them from the darkness?
Yep.
I sometimes wonder if we're talking about like the paranormal version of that.
Well, here's an interesting thing. In Santa Fe, their version of La Llorona doesn't wear white. It's all in black.
Oh, interesting.
Shall I give you a brief excerpt?
You know it.
So this is from John's book, as I said, La Llorona, Her Kith and Kin. Okay. And he obviously does an introduction in the beginning all about the birth and the history of it. There's also been sightings in Texas as well. But this one is specifically about Santa Fe. So, noted folklorist Aurelio M. Esposa thought the legend of La Llorona was unique to Santa Fe when he wrote of her in 1910, and also described her as dressed all in black rather than white, nor was she associated with any body of water in his rendition. The myth of the weeping woman, La Llorona, is peculiar to Santa Fe. A strange woman dressed in black, dragging heavy chains and weeping bitterly, is often seen after midnight walking about the dark streets or standing at the windows and doors of private houses. Vague ideas are expressed about her, but many state that she is a soul from purgatory desiring to communicate with someone or obliged to atone for her sins by dragging chains and weeping. That any soul from purgatory or heaven can come down to earth to communicate with relatives and friends is a widespread belief in New Mexico, and it is not strange that any apparition, real or imaginary, is looked upon as a wandering soul. When the weeping woman is heard weeping at the door, no one leaves the house, and finally she departs, continuing her sad lamentations and dragging heavy chains. And I know certain parts also consider her to be like a banshee. She's an omen of death.
Right.
So if she turns up or visits your house or you see her, then someone you love or are close to will die in the next few days. So you've got specific parts of New Mexico where they believe in the same thing, but their sort of origin story or their powers or what they symbolize is uniquely different to specific areas, which once again shows that it's not just some kind of cross-contamination of the same legend. They are distinctly different.
Well, while we ponder that mystery, you folks are going to listen to some ads, unless, of course, you are a subscriber on Patreon or Apple Podcasts, and then you don't have to listen to any of that crap. The final story we'll be reading tonight from Adobe Angels is ABQ. And again, if you want to read more of Antonio Garcez's work, you can find them on Amazon. There's a ton of stuff out there, including his final book, Unforgettable Ghost Story Interviews, that was finished by Hank after Antonio passed. But there's also Arizona Ghost Stories, New Mexico Ghost Stories Volume 1, New Mexico Ghost Stories Volume 2, Colorado Ghost Stories, American Indian Ghost Stories of the West, Ghost Stories of the Medical Profession, Ghost Stories of California's Gold Rush Country and Yosemite National Park. So there's a lot of stuff out there on Amazon that you can pick up. And again, these are the kind of books I really enjoy because they are, I mean, handcrafted isn't the right word, but this is someone who's taken the time to go interview people individually. This is not someone who's done a Google search or whatever, or said some say or many say, or just, kind of used a goddamn list of the most haunted locations in a place. This is someone who's taken the time to do the legwork. And it's honestly my great regret that we did not become aware of Antonio's work until after he passed, because I would have loved to have had directly have a chat with him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or perhaps sent numerous emails to MUFON about a series of incidents, or from the same IP address.
Oh, I see. This is something. It's not something Antonio did. This is something another researcher did.
Yeah, research is a very loose word there.
I see.
What are we making up today?
Is this our favorite maker-upper of bullshit? Our favorite generously proportioned fabulist?
I couldn't comment.
So yes, okay. Well, folks, if you know, you know, and if you don't, we're not going to say, because they are also a litigious fabulist.
Fuck that shit.
It's like getting into a fight with Walter from The Big Lebowski. It's just not worth it. That should tip them off. All right, so ABQ. Antonio says, the ABQ Valley is an area rich in ancient human history that can be traced over 1,000 years ago. Anasazi is a term generally used to describe the original inhabitants of the valley. Anasazi is a Navajo word that means the ancient ones or ancient enemies. Clearly, modern Pueblo people object to this term to describe their ancestors. Although the current 8 northern Pueblos do not have a common name for their ancestors, the term ancestral Puebloans is acceptable in English. The ancestral Puebloans settled and farmed the region between AD 1 and AD 1300. They produced ornaments, tools, pottery, and extraordinarily fine baskets. These ancestral Puebloans were rich in spirituality and maintained a rich ingenuity of herbology and knowledge of their environment. And actually, I just want to stop right here and say, I did not know this, and I think it tells you a lot about the relationship between the Pueblo people and the establishment who runs the tours of that area, that ancestral Puebloans never came up, and Anasazi is over everything. So I just think it's worth commenting on. But anyways, their ability to exist in an area of extreme weather changes and unfriendly raiding neighbors cannot be overestimated. Their achievements included an elaborate trade network with other Pueblo regions throughout the Southwest, spanning the modern states of New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. Of great historical importance and seen in the ABQ Valley today are their cliff dwellings and pueblos, apartment house-style villages. In addition to these ancient ruins, the ABQ Valley also contains the modern monastery of Christ in the Desert, which was founded in 1964 by Father Allred Wall and 2 monks from Mount Savior Monastery in New York. The Benedictine monastery is nestled in the stunningly beautiful Chama River Canyon and welcomes visitors with prior notification. Given the current notoriety of the ABQ Valley with the opening of the new Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, the reputation of ABQ's beautiful terrain is captivating artists far and wide. As the history and culture of this enchanted valley becomes ever more popular with the outside world, one thing is certain: ABQ will always remain an extraordinary retreat for the human soul. As one older Hispanic resident stated to me, "I have no need to desire anything in life. When God placed me in ABQ, He gave me heaven." My interview with Napoleon took place on the porch of his home, located directly across the street from the old ABQ Village Church, St. Thomas Apostle. The village of ABQ is where Napoleon was raised, and where, just walking distance from Napoleon's house, Georgia O'Keeffe's own home is located. Napoleon was eager to share local lore and bits of information about his childhood, including stories of ghosts. Napoleon is also well known throughout the ABQ Valley as a man who can direct visitors to points of interest in and around ABQ. In fact, from the information center he operates from his home, he will even direct visitors to these points of interest for a small price. Decorating his home are various carved crucifixes and pueblo ladders, which he carved out of native aspen wood. Some are for sale. Among other topics, Napoleon is proud to state that his family helped with the construction of the nearby Benedictine monastery, Christ in the Desert. Napoleon Paul Garcia's story. I am a native of ABQ and have lived in the village all my life. I currently offer information to tourists, such as maps and points of interest, that only a native of this area, like myself, is qualified to give. I offer this information service directly out of my home. The most frequently asked questions to me are about Georgia O'Keeffe. I am very happy to share my personal information with anyone who asks, since I knew her very well. I also try to inform tourists about my village of ABQ and the surrounding country, because there is a lot of history here that is just as important as the stories I can tell of Georgia O'Keeffe. Georgia and I began our acquaintance when I was just a child. As the years progressed and I grew to adulthood, she hired me to help in the restoration of her home here at the village. I also planted many of the trees that decorate her gardens and property. I took care of any repair work that was needed in her home, repairing walls that needed plastering, doing electrical work, etc. I also had the position of being her personal chauffeur, driving her to and from appointments in Taos, Santa Fe, and Albuquerque. Now, as far as ghosts are concerned, well, I don't know if you're going to believe me, but here in my own home, my wife, sons, and I have all had strange happenings. I would say that we definitely have a spirit or ghost that dwells within our home. When we are in our beds, sometimes we'll get the feeling that someone is in the room with us. Although we can see that no one is actually in the room, there is a strong sensation of a presence. Very soon after we have this feeling, the spirit will make its presence known to us by loud footsteps walking up and down the stairs. The sound of the footsteps will enter our bedrooms, and our mattresses will actually show the indentation of a body sitting at the foot of the bed. We all hear these footsteps that will walk from room to room. We believe that the ghost is the spirit of a man because of the heavy, loud footsteps. The ghost also moves such items as my personal wood carving tools and coffee cups that are filled with freshly poured hot coffee. I will look all about the house for those items, and they are nowhere to be found. I eventually discover these items in rooms of the house that make no sense for them to be located. I think that the ghost is a friendly spirit, because if it wanted to do us any harm, he would have done so a long time ago. I think he just wants to play and visit with us. The people of the village also tell of a woman who is heard screaming or crying. The sound comes from the cemetery that is located up above the village, just west of the Morada, the penitent chapel. This woman is dressed in dark clothing, and she allows people to view her from a distance. When anyone attempts to get close to her, she disappears. I have heard about this woman for many years. For lack of a better word to describe her, we all just refer to her as La Llorona, the weeping woman. I can remember that as a young boy, I would see balls of light that would bounce off the roofs of houses in the village. My friends and I would sit on a bench on the plaza at night, and we would witness these strange lights, which would get us quite scared. Our parents would tell us that the lights were witches, so we were very cautious. Things used to be different many years ago in ABQ. For instance, when a person would die, the velorio, wake, would be in the family's living room. The coffin and body would be displayed for the mourners to view in the house. This might seem odd, but at that time, we had no morticians or methods of embalming. The deceased would be given the velorio usually the same evening of their death, and buried the following day. There is a story that people tell in the village. Now, I have heard this story since I was just a small boy. The story is about a member of the religious Penitente Brotherhood. Years ago, the Penitentes used to walk the dirt streets of the village on special religious holidays. They would wear a large handkerchief over their heads to disguise their identities. As they would walk the streets, some would carry a whip of knotted cords, which they used to self-flagellate. They would do this to show their devotion and reverence to their spirituality and their Catholic religion. There was one penitente who was different from the rest. This penitente would conduct his walk by himself at night. As he would make his way through the village, the people would show him respect by making the sign of the cross as he passed. The people did not recognize this strange devotee, but because of his strong self-sacrifice, gave him respect nonetheless. This penitente also had an unusual habit of walking down roads that led away from the morada. When some individuals followed him at a distance, to their surprise, they discovered he would simply disappear. Of course, the village people knew immediately this was no ordinary penitente, but a spiritual being. As I have heard the story, there was one individual who decided to follow the penitente the next time he walked through the village. The young man wanted to prove to everyone that he was not afraid and was braver than the rest. He wanted to find out who this penitente was. The next time the penitente walked through the village, he was ready. The night was very dark, and sure enough, the penitente walked by with the young man following behind. Nearing the edge of the village, the penitente noticed he was being followed and extended his arm, gesturing for the young man to stop. He did not say anything. He just made it clear to him that he was not welcome to follow the penitente any further. The young man chose to disregard the warning and continued to follow. The penitente continued his walk, but this time he took a new route, which led up to the cemetery. With the young man following close behind, they both entered the cemetery grounds. Well into the cemetery, the penitente slowed his pace, allowing the young man to get fairly close to him. When he got close enough to the penitente stopped and turned to face the man. The man walked right up to the penitente and asked him, "Who are you?" Slowly, the penitente raised one arm to his head and took hold of the handkerchief. He then quickly pulled it off, revealing a white skull. One quite well-known story is of a witch that lived in the village many years ago. This witch was left alone by the people, and because of her powers, was known to have the ability to turn herself into animal form. This ability allowed her to sneak up to houses and peer into windows without drawing the attention of the occupants. By doing this, she used the information she gathered against people. One evening, an unusually large black owl kept flying around the village. The people had their suspicions that it was the witch who had transformed herself into an owl. Because the people believed her to be evil, they approached a man and asked him to kill her. The man brought out his rifle. Before he placed them in the chamber, he took out his pocket knife and carved a cross on the tip of the bullets. This was done to ensure that, with this Christian symbol, the bullet would reach its mark. The man went to where the owl had been spotted, took aim, and fired. The bullet hit the owl, and in a cloud of black feathers, the owl flew away into the nearby hills. The following day, the woman who the people suspected to be the witch was seen in her yard with a large, bloodied bandage wrapped around her shoulder. There are other stories of the valley, and one in particular takes place just north of ABQ in Ghost Ranch. Years ago, it was called Rancho de los Brujos, Ranch of the Witches. Long ago, the cattle rustlers used to steal cattle from the local ranchers and take them to the box canyon of Rancho de los Brujos. If anyone dared to be so brave as to follow these phantom rustlers into the canyon, they would never be seen again. The stories are told of ghostly sounds of horses, gunfights, etc., and of balls of fire that bounce off the canyon walls. Today, the local people of the village find lots of Indian artifacts buried on private land in the village. I know of people digging holes for fence posts to turn up large metates, grinding stones, bowls, and skeletons. We are very respectful when we find a skeleton. We will take the bones to other locations in the hills and rebury them. I also know that some people have taken them to our cemetery and buried them there. We never display the bones. It's bad to do such things. The whole village is surrounded by Indian ruins. The valley of ABQ is growing, and some of the strangers who have moved into our valley come with ideas that sometimes do not mix well with the locals. They visit our valley and fall in love with the land. Then they decide to buy a lot and build their homes. But after a year or two, some of the strangers decide to change our way of life to fit what they think is best, to make it resemble the place where they originally came from. We locals have our own beautiful traditions here in ABQ, and we have been fine for hundreds of years. Not all of the strangers are like this, just a few. Overall, so far, things have been going well for everyone. And I sort of imagine if you asked this fellow now, 30 years later, you would just hear the sound of his killdozer starting.
Why not?
Why not? So what I really found compelling about that was all the orbs, the balls of light. I mean, that's, again, that's completely outside, we're not talking about like orbs of light in a camera. These are visible orbs.
Yep. Yep. There are some of the La Llorona family that are described as balls of light that bounce around.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Interesting.
It's not a one-size-fits-all phenomena. There's loads of bits to it. Like I said, everybody knows the main thing, that La Llorona is this weeping, wailing woman by the side of a river or whatever, lamenting the death of her children. But I know there's a version where she's sad because her boyfriend went into the mountains during the winter and died, and that's why she's crying. ABQ, the one is to do with a woman who lost her faith or had an affair with the local priest who disowned her, and therefore she threw the baby off the top of the church and killed it, and she spends her day all in black wandering the graveyard and the town crying. So that's the ABQ version of it. But there are others in certain parts, more so in Mexico than New Mexico, where people see balls of light that turn into a woman.
Oh, wild.
So it's, like I said, there are layers to La Llorona. It's not just as with anything, it's not the Hollywood version of the story. That's just the
Which is good, because that movie sucked. I'm sorry, Michael Chavez. That one was bad.
Yeah. So, it's entrenched in popular culture, but it's not the same thing, once again. And it's also affected people so deeply that even in real life, people have killed their children and claimed it was La Llorona. There was a woman in Texas in the 80s who killed 2 of her children. Jesus Christ. And said that she was trying to summon La Llorona because of her domestic situation. She was extremely, her and her children had been suffering from severe domestic abuse. And she unfortunately lost her mind. But when she was arrested, she claimed she was La Llorona. It
reminds me of the Slender Man thing, when that girl got stabbed by those 2 nutters. And I just think, because there was such a to-do about the internet and Slender Man and everything, but this shit is this is a thing we do.
Yeah, there'll always be people of a certain mindset who will gravitate to weird and strange things because it unopens something dark inside of them. It is not the paranormal that is causing that. It is their state of mind for a variety of reasons. And that, I did not expect her to be back in the news last year, the main culprit.
Morgan Geyser, when she escaped.
Yeah. That's a bad egg.
Was she ever found?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, she went on the run in November and was captured 12 hours later. She was in a group home on a sort of, this is the thing. Why is she getting day release? This is just baffling. And she was found at a truck stop in Illinois. And when they pulled up, she said, just Google me and you'll find out who I am.
Jesus Christ.
She got conditional release in July. She'd been in prison 7 years in a mental institution. She was sent there in 2018. So 7 years ago, she served 7 years for stabbing her classmate 19 times and has served 7 years in a mental institution. And then within 3 months of being on general release, she's tried to make a break for it. The other girl, what's her name? Something Via, weren't it?
I actually can't remember her name. It's only the other one whose name ever occurs to me.
Anissa Via.
Oh, of course, yes.
She got 25 years, but she was released 5 years ago. So she served 3 years.
Man. Oof. I hope that, they were young, and I hope that for her, at least, I hope the time gave her an opportunity to think, what the fuck was I doing? And to go forward and live a life that's worth living. I know there's a lot of cases that's not what happens. I know with the, of course, the Rena Verk case. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, James Bulger here.
Yeah, where the culprit kind of goes off and gets seemingly the kid glove treatment and just continually reoffends in some way or another. So I hope that's not the case for her. I hope she has gotten her shit together and makes something of her life, because obviously her friend is not capable of doing the same. So this concludes our exploration of Adobe Angels, Ghosts of O'Keefe Country by Antonio Garcez. Of course, as we mentioned, you can find more of Antonio's work at ghostbooks.biz, and that is a press still operated by his husband, Hank Estrada. And the plan is to have Hank on the next Talk Spooky to talk a little bit more about Antonio's legacy, his ghost stories, the ghost stories in New Mexico in general. I cannot encourage you enough to seek his stuff out. Like I said, this is high quality ghost stuff that I've read so far. I wish we had more time to share more of this book with you. And if you like what you hear, this one is not available for sale on their website, but you can read it for free on the Internet Archive. That's what we've done here. And everything we have read was read with permission of Hank Estrada and Red Rabbit Press. So again, that's Adobe Angels, Ghosts of O'Keefe Country by Antonio Garcez. Find more of his stuff at ghostbooks.biz. And we are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care.
Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories.
Our paranormal captain is Mr. Brennan Storr, steaming the good ship Ghost Story Guys into the next ghostly harbour.
And of course, my friend and co-host is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
I'm talking about how true Rendlesham is and how everything about it's real.
I knew you had to eventually. You had to finally admit.
Yeah. It was such a terrifying incident that Holt waited 2 weeks to send a letter to his boss about what had happened. That's how terrified they were. Anyway,
You get busy, you know.
Facts, eh? Cold War. Let's not call the Air Force in. No. Anyway, I'm very cynical sometimes about this weird shit.
No.
I'm delighted to welcome back our good friend Jason Offit as we dive into his previous book, Chasing American Monsters, as we go on the search for some weird and wonderful cryptids, as well as a deep dive, ironically, into the strange thing that lives in Alaska's Lake Iliana.
Very cool. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all podcast sites and most social media networks.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. You can find my horror fiction show, Fear Daily, everywhere fine podcasts live. And of course, I co-author that with Brandon Scheck-Snyder. And I just finished submitting These Haunted Times Volume 6, the audiobook version, to Audible. So that will be available very soon. You can get your copy on audible.com. Again, that is These Haunted Times Volume 6, written by Ruth Roper Wilde and narrated by yours truly.
And featuring a story from me.
And featuring a story from Paul. It's a Ghost Story Guys family affair.
I've just realised something as well before we go.
What's
I
that?
didn't tell you the best urban myth about New Mexico.
Oh, hit me.
So, you know the story about Atari and the E.T. game that bombed?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was broken and so bad that they eventually hit it in a salt mine or bulldozed it into a salt mine or something.
It is allegedly buried in Alamogordo landfill.
No kidding.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of crushed up copies of E.T. the video game by Atari are allegedly at the bottom of Alamogordo landfill. Because it only opened in 1982 and they think it all got dumped in there.
No shit.
Nobody knows if that's true or not, but that's one of the places where the location is said to be. So it's one of New Mexico's most famous urban myths.
Well, there you go. Ghost Story Guys, Urban Explorers, get digging. As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. You guys are incredible. We deeply, deeply appreciate everything you do for us. And if you want to get access to our brand new Discord server, which is pretty sweet, it's a place we can chat, shoot the shit about paranormal stories, movies, music, all kinds of cool stuff. You can get that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. You can also click the link in the show notes. Or you can sign up to Apple Podcasts. I haven't figured out a way to get those guys on board yet, but I'm working on it. And again, a private Discord server. It may go public at some point in the future. We're kind of digging the patron-only thing right now, but we'll see. But you can also get bonus conversations between myself and Paul, early access to ad-free episodes, our monthly live stream, Ghost Force shoutouts, and so much more. You can get all of that by clicking the link in the show notes, heading to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or becoming a cabinista on Apple Podcasts. Paul, do you have any guest spots coming up?
Well, by the time this is out, I will have done one. I'm doing a live talk for ASAP on Thursday in regards to poltergeist.
Oh, fantastic. Will that be archived where people can find it?
I believe so, yes. I believe that Caroline will be dealing with that.
Cool.
So, yes, that was arranged at Parameet last year. So it's been a long time coming. So that's coming up. And I will be returning to Kate's show shortly to continue our conversation about strange things as well soon. But I'm not sure when we've got a date for that at the moment.
Very cool. And you can find all of our appearances cataloged at ghoststoryguys.com. Also, you can find full show notes there. And if you want to pick up some Ghost Story Guys merch, including t-shirts, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff, that's the place to do it. ghoststoryguys.com. And if you want to get in touch, you can also fill out a form there. You can email us at ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. You can find us, again, on Reddit as r/ghoststoryguys podcast. You can find us on Instagram as The Ghost Story Guys, and we are on Facebook as The Ghost Story Guys Cabin. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I think that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then,
Into the darkness we go. You'll need to be hung like a horse to reach the bottom of our K-holes.
I'm not a downers guy. Though some people would suggest I should try them.
So anytime I see anything Vine related, I'm like, Bestel.
I used to love it, me. So strange things. Oh no, here comes the wall bummer.
You saw that. I don't care if no one else liked it. I thought it was funny.
It made me fucking laugh all day. I sent it to lots of people. And they all laughed too, because we're all sick.
That's true.
Now who's missing? Who's a fucking doctor? I've just seen him interviewed in the hospital he works at, Philip. What do you think he's broke in to pretend?